Hello and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT how to play video. Today our analyst will be diving into how to play Irelia Socialite for patch 12.5b. Irelia emerged from the ashes of the B patch stronger than ever before. This is partially due to practically every other comp being nerfed, but also players figuring out an effective way to play and build Irelia. Few other compositions are as flexible and consistent as Irelia Socialite, making it one of the premier builds to play if your goal is to climb in ranked. We'll be covering core champions, traits, items, augments, and more as we delve into how to play Irelia Socialite. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Let's begin by talking about why Irelia is strong in the current meta. While other champions got overall weaker in the B patch, Irelia managed to go the opposite direction and is now one of the most contested champions in the meta. One of the reasons for this is that not many compositions have the frontline or CC to shut down Irelia effectively. Even Bramble Vest isn't enough defense as it was recently nerfed, making it less effective against crits and units using Infinity Edge. Another reason for Irelia doing well is that you can plop her into a lot of different boards and still do well. As long as you have good items and augments with a few socialites, Irelia can be played with an assortment of champions or synergies. We'll cover more later, but the bottom line is having that much flexibility as a carry makes Irelia highly valuable. Finally, there's just not many other carries that can do what Irelia is capable of. She deals a lot of damage even at level 1, can reset, is able to be positioned anywhere on the board for Socialite and other buffs, and can use a wide assortment of items. More than likely, we'll see Irelia nerfed a bit in 12.6, but that patch is still a few weeks away, so we recommend using Irelia now to climb. With that, we can talk about the actual composition, beginning with the core champions and traits. Right away, the obvious core champions and traits are Irelia, the main carry, and Socialite champions like Gnar, Seraphine, and Senna. It's fine to play Irelia with just one or two Socialites, but all three do unlock the healing aspect of Socialite, and that pairs nicely with Irelia. Galio is unfortunately the forgotten 5 cost of the set, though you can use him if your board hits level 9 and it's not disrupting the rest of your synergies to toss a Galio in. There's no definitive way to run Irelia Socialite because there's a ton of viable variations. That said, the most common is Irelia with innovators. The core champions at level 8 for this build are Irelia, Gnar, Seraphine, Zillion, Echo, Jace, another innovator, or Emblem, and Orianna. Senna can also be used for Enchanter Socialite to either replace Orianna or by dropping 2 innovators. But the goal is 2 to 3 Socialites with 3 to 5 innovators plus Irelia. Another variation is essentially going all in on damage for Irelia with 6 Striker. This does require an emblem either from a spatula or an augment, but it does add a lot of extra damage. Champions for this variation are Irelia, Gnar, Rek'Sai, Sivir, Jarvan, and any unit that you want to give a striker emblem to. And the rest of the composition can be rounded out with Senna, Seraphine, and another enchanter like Orianna. The major difference between those two variations is scaling. Innovators are by far the best for scaling into the late game, while strikers often struggle due to a bunch of low-cost champions. But it all comes down to playing what you hit. Just be aware you may only be in a place to top 4 with strikers, while the innovator board is more likely to win. Overall, all you need is Irelia, Gnar, and ideally 1 or 2 more Socialite champions. Senna works the best in general because she's an enchanter as well. From there, you want frontline champions to buy time for Irelia to reset, which can really be anything that you're able to find, but a few to keep in mind are Jace, Vi, Braum, Leona, and Morgana. Toss a few backline units like Orianna and you're good to go. That's the beauty of playing Irelia carry, you have a ton of options. Let's continue now on to the next section, core items. First off, Irelia needs good items to do well. With lackluster items, she can get stuck on units, which slows down her resets. No resets, no win. That doesn't necessarily mean Irelia has to adhere to the same items every game. Instead, you want to cover 2 main issues that she has. First issue is dealing damage against high defensive units. Bramble Vest is certainly weaker, but still able to slow Irelia down effectively. Defensive traits or items are all rough for Irelia to deal with, as her kit is all about dealing attack damage in quick bursts. The easiest solution to this is with Last Whisper. Giant Slayer also helps out a lot since it's a big boost of damage against most frontline units. Either of those items on their own is ideal for Irelia, or you can utilize both. Another issue Irelia has is lack of backline access. Most of the time, this is an issue you won't be able to avoid easily other than positioning, but having an assassin emblem can bypass this issue and is often a best in slot item. Once Irelia gets onto the squishy, she'll be dashing around like crazy. Obviously, this is not guaranteed every game, but try to keep an item slot open in case you get an assassin augment or emblem. Survivability is also an issue, or more specifically, CC. An Irelia that gets CC'd is often a dead one, and the easiest solution is Quicksilver. It's not a must-have, but it does help a lot. Other items can be just as good, but also provide additional benefits like Bloodthirster for the shield or Titan's Resolve for the bonus defensive stats. As for damage, generic options are always fine like Infinity Edge or Deathblade. Edge of Night is a mixture of damage and utility, which can be decent if you have no other viable options. What you do not need for Irelia is attack speed, as she won't be spending a ton of time auto-attacking. Lastly, you can look for less than perfect items like Deathcap or even Archangels, as they increase the scaling of her ability. All in all, if you want the stock standard items that make Irelia pop off, then we recommend Infinity Edge, Last Whisper, and Quicksilver. Just keep in mind, it's not always feasible to get best in slot items, so always keep your options open. Now for the fun part, Augments. There are plenty of options for Augments with Irelia as the main carry. In general, you want at least one, preferably two, combat augments centered around boosting Irelia in some capacity. The third augment can either be an early game econ augment or some type of utility like an assassin emblem. Starting off, let's talk about the 1/4 augment. This is where you want to be careful about getting too specific with your augment. While the goal is to play Irelia, you should keep your options open. That means looking for generic augments that are useful in Stage 2 to help build your economy or win streak. Playing to win is preferable because high health means you have more time later to roll for an Irelia too, so we recommend looking for good combat augments early game. Luden's Echo, Cybernetic Implants, Knife's Edge, Battle Mage, Phalanx, and Weak Spot are just a few that we recommend that often help with early win streaking. Econ augments are just fine as well, but they generally don't help with winning unless there's something like True 2s that provides board strength. We do recommend staying away from ultra-specific augments like things related to traits or other augments that are conditional. They can be viable on 1/4, but it's a bit too early to make definitive decisions about your late-game board. That said, Socialite is often playable in a lot of comps, so it's not the worst option on 1/4 if there's an augment for it. But in general, stick to either econ augments or combat traits to boost your board strength. On 3/3, you can get a lot more specific by picking up an Assassin Emblem augment or a Striker augment. The same general rules apply about combat augments, but you'll have a bit more wiggle room to aim for anything that helps Irelia. Just keep in mind that you may end up pivoting in Stage 4 if you don't hit Irelia, so always be aware of that when choosing an augment. Finally, on 4/6, you always want the strongest augment to either provide utility for Irelia or damage. This is because you will know for certain whether or not you're playing Irelia by 4/6, so you can take those specific augments without repercussion. The easiest way to decide is to take something that you're missing. Lacking in damage, take an augment like Knife's Edge or Weak Spot. Need utility? Celestial Blessing adds a good amount of healing, or Verdant Veil for some CC immunity. There's rarely ever a decision when it comes to the augments because the best option is usually obvious, especially taking into consideration that Irelia is a melee carry. Consider the traits often used with her like Socialite, Striker, Innovator, and Assassin. With all that in mind, the correct decision should be easy peasy. Our final section will be a quick run through each stage of the game, beginning with the early game. Component priority is a player choice in the current meta because at the end of the day, the first component you take is rarely going to make a huge difference. Yes, it does help, but having a chain vest instead of a sword, for example, isn't an issue. That said, sword and glove are the two best choices if your goal is to play Irelia, as both of them build into multiple items that she uses. Glove is slightly lower in priority just because it has fewer slammable items in the early game. Stage 1 is quick and easy as your goal is the same as always: find pairs. Put together a cohesive board and decide between going on a loss or a win streak. Keep in mind this isn't always a decision you can make in a vacuum because every lobby is different, but basically you either are playing for econ with a loss streak or play to win by pushing levels. Stage 2 boards can be a wide assortment, but by far the best option is Innovators and Scrap, since both of them transition well into Irelia later on. Scrap is particularly good with Junkyard to farm a bunch of extra components. Innovators are also quite flexible in general, meaning you can play Irelia later on or play a different variation if need be. Another potential opening board is with Strikers and Hextech centered around Gnar. Gnar can be amazing in the early game with decent damage and high health, and has 3 synergies to play around with: Socialite, Striker, and Yordles. Striker comes into play with Rek'Sai and Jarvan, with Hextech rounding it out thanks to Sejuani. The rest of Stage 2 is about maintaining your streak. Don't level if you're losing, and be sure to scout out other weaker players. Win streakers want to push level 5 as soon as possible, and again, be diligent about scouting. It's also worthwhile to slam items to help win rounds. Moving into the mid-game with Stage 3 and 4 is where your Irelia board will begin to come together. In Stage 3, you can mostly skip through it because the only major decision is your augment, but if you do go into this stage with a loss streak, you may need to roll on 6. Don't spend too much, but try to stabilize with upgraded frontline units and an item holder like Ezreal, Senna, Gangplank, or even Lucian. From there, you want to level to 7x4-1, and then it's rolling time. A level 8 is ideal. Most boards won't be strong enough to fast level. Plus, Irelia is heavily contested, so not rolling on 7 puts you at risk of never finding her. So, roll! Try to find at least one Irelia and then build a board around her. If you're unable to find Irelia, that's fine. Plenty of other champions can use her items like Draven, Jhin, Sivir, and 3-cost units like Senna. The best part about Irelia is being able to transition if needed. Once you've rolled and stabilized, the goal is to begin saving for level 8. Finally, the late game is where you want to stabilize at level 8 with a cohesive board built around Irelia. This can be strikers, innovators, socialite, whatever you want, just play what you're able to upgrade. From the middle of stage 5 to the end of the game, there's not a whole lot that you need to do with this board. Positioning always matters, but Irelia is usually in a fixed position due to the socialite hacks. It can be worth it to move her if she's constantly being targeted, but the unfortunate downside to Socialite is not being able to change your positioning too much. That said, it's still important to do so if necessary. Overall, there's not too much that you need to worry about in the late game. The main win conditions for Irelia Socialite are upgrading all of your champions, but mostly it comes down to Irelia items and augments. Irelia 3 is an option, but rarely doable, and level 9 is fine to play for if you have the economy to do so, but it's not necessary. As always, focusing on the early stages of the game is more likely to have a direct impact on your placement than the late game is. And that's all for today's video, folks. While Irelia Socialite is a composition we recommend for climbing ranks, keep in mind it is often heavily contested. Every lobby is going to have at least 2 Irelia players, so always be willing to transition. Let us know in the comment section below which composition you'd like us to cover in our next How to Play video. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to like the button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.